Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Self-Discovery with me, Jaclyn Steele. Today's topic is, what does knowing yourself feel like? So, being the fairly introspective person that I am, throughout my entire life, I've been told over and over again, just be yourself. Whether it was for an interview or going on a date or going on stage to sing, just be yourself. And while I love this saying, and I think that it's one that is said with really good and positive intent, I think in action it can be confusing because what does being ourselves really look like and feel like in action? So that's the impetus behind this episode. If you're interested in that subject matter, then you definitely want to stick around. So, one of the reasons I think it's so difficult to figure out how to be ourselves is because we live in a time right now that is so wildly overstimulating. We're connected to our phones. We're connected to TVs. We're consistently and constantly connected to the internet. We are connected to other people. We're connected to social media. You guys get the idea. There's constant messaging coming in all the time. And so it can be really confusing and really hard to get quiet enough to feel to hear and feel who we really are, to be able to hear our own voices, to be able to feel our own feelings. And so before I deep dive into what it feels like to know myself, and I'm just going to use myself as an example, I want to talk about the underpinnings of how we can get into a place of discovering who we are. Because I can tell you what I think for me it feels like to be myself. But I think that it's really important that I give you the ways in which I discovered these things about myself. Because I think they're really, really important and beyond worth noting. And the first one, I would say, the biggest thing for me in knowing and understanding myself is space and silence. In music, as a musician, there's a saying that says it's the space between the notes. And the space between the notes is so important because sometimes silence in a song is exactly what the song needs. And that's what makes it so special. It gives it room to breathe. It gives room for interpretation, etc. And I love that saying. And I love that saying when it pertains to self-discovery as well, because I feel like we need space between the feelings. We need space between our reaction and why we reacted that way. We need to understand what it is that we are feeling so that we can have control over our reactions and our emotions better and make better decisions the next time. So space and silence have been such a huge thing for me. And within that space and silence, there are a couple of things that I do regularly that keep me tuned up, that keep the oil change, so to speak. Number one is meditation. And I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that I am a fantastic meditator because I don't know that I am. But one thing I will say is that I consistently show up to meditate. So I'm not a master at turning my thoughts off or having a blank slate mind, but I am really good at showing up every day, being open to whatever it is that I need to be hearing, or whatever kind of communication that's going to be channeled through, which if you do meditate regularly, happens. I find that during meditation, inspiration will come out of nowhere. A song idea will just plop into my lap, or a memory from my past will bubble up that will pertain to something I'm going through now and why I reacted a certain way. And it's because I was triggered. Or, hey, you know what? I am just going too fast and I'm feeling like I'm on the verge of burnout. Meditation is a fantastic way to check in with your current state of affairs with yourself. We do that on our phones, on social media all the time, right? We're checking people's statuses. We're checking how many likes we have and checking our direct messages, et cetera, checking statistics and analytics. But I think it's a lost art to check those things within yourself. What are your own analytics? Like, where are you? What's your energy level like? Are you sleepy? Have you eaten well? Is what you're eating a catalyst for a clear mind or a catalyst for where you want to be going? And eating is just one example, but checking in and engaging with how you're feeling is a huge part of self-discovery. And so within that idea of space and silence, meditation is one of my primary ways to check in and uncover and recover who I am. It allows me to slow down. I breathe, I relax. When I'm feeling anxious and then I consciously meditate, I feel my anxiety melting away. It's easier for me to make decisions. It's easier for me to be positive throughout the day because I've taken some time and space and energy for myself. So I'm so much less reactionary. Another thing that has been huge for me and rivals meditation, I would say they are on equal ground, is writing, journaling, and just stream of consciousness journaling, Julia Cameron style from The Artist's Way. Allowing yourself to get out whatever it is that is clogging your mind is so powerful. The writer Joan Didion said, "I write so that I can figure out how I feel." And that is me to a T. I write so that I can figure out how I feel. And when you figure out how you feel about something, that's part of knowing who you are. Okay, so space and silence, meditation, writing, those are all catalysts to self-discovery. So fun fact, I Googled literally, what does it mean to know oneself? And I thought that this would be an interesting experiment because I certainly have ideas of what it means to know yourself, and I certainly have feelings about what it feels like to feel like yourself. But I wanted to know what people on the internet were saying. And answers ran all over the place, but some of them were really interesting. And one answer, actually two, but the first one I'm going to talk about is one that I found on Quora from a former nurse. And Quora is a message board. And so all these people were weighing in, but this woman's message really stood out to me. And she said that she thinks knowing yourself involves 4 core principles. She talked about personality, core values, knowing your body, and knowing your dreams. So personality being your likes and your dislikes, your interests and things that you really aren't interested in, etc. Your core values, what matters to you? Is it loyalty? Is it friendship? Is it love? Is it laughter? Is it safety? Is it money? Etc. Then knowing your body. I think this is something that we don't talk about often enough, which I do want to get into in other podcast episodes. I'm not going to do a deep dive into that right now, but knowing your body, like what is it you're feeling? For me, that goes into metaphysical things too. Like if I'm having hip pain, is there some kind of emotion associated with pain in the right hip? Am I sleeping when I'm tired? Am I listening to my body's cries, or am I ignoring them and just trying to push through? And then that last one of knowing your dreams. So what is it that you want to be when you grow up? What is it when you're an adult that makes you excited that you want to work toward? What are those aspirations? I think all of those 4 core things, personality, values, knowing your body, knowing your dreams, are really important. But the thing that I found next I thought was even more telling when it comes to this idea of knowing yourself and knowing what it feels like to be yourself. And deep down on that same message board in Quora, another guy, he went by John Doe, wrote, "In life, there are three things that define who we are: how we see ourselves, how others see us, and who we really are." I like this, and this makes so much sense to me because truly knowing yourself is the third one to me. It's who you really are. And on the surface, that seems obvious, but I don't think that it is. I think that what happens beyond this meat suit that is what the world sees is a whole ocean of feelings and meaning and questions and all kinds of those things. And one of the things that I think is so important that also is not often talked about is one of the first things required to truly know yourself and go on the path into self-discovery. And to me, that is acceptance. It is understanding where you are right now and fully accepting it. There's so much anxiety and confusion that bubbles up in our lives when we are living out of alignment. And that's why I think self-discovery is so important, because self-discovery helps us get back into alignment. But one of the things that I think keeps us from self-discovery is this idea that we really dislike who we are. And that breaks my heart. But if we can figure out a way to accept where we are in life right now, just completely accept and forgive ourselves as much as we possibly can, then we can open up the doors to a whole new way of living. If we are unwilling to accept where we are and our current circumstances, it's going to be really, really hard to grow, because we're not going to have any kind of, we won't have any kind of baseline to go from. So now that we have talked about kind of what society thinks self-discovery is, what I feel like are catalysts to getting into self-discovery and starting the process, and we've talked about acceptance so that you know your baseline, I want to talk about and give some examples of what knowing myself personally feels like, because I can't speak for anyone else. I don't want to speak for anyone else. And I don't want to assume anything about you either. So I'm just going to speak from my own experience. And to me, I'm going to go over probably about 20 examples of what knowing myself really feels like. And here they are. Respecting my body's impulses. It's feeling so connected to my physical and mental state that I move when I need to move. And by movement, I mean exercise, walking, yoga, lifting weights, those kinds of things. I eat when I'm hungry. I refuse to eat when I'm not hungry. And I rest when I'm tired. It is so tragic to me that we live in a culture that is constantly telling us to ignore our body's impulses and to just keep going. Drink that Monster, drink more caffeine. You don't need sleep. You can rest when you die. Like those kinds of things that I think are just devastating our health. It's saying no when you want to say no, and yes when you want to say yes. And this comes down to boundaries. It comes down to figuring out what you will or will not allow when it comes to the way that people treat you. My mom growing up used to tell me, you teach people how to treat you. And it's so true. Whether you're telling them directly or indirectly, you are teaching people how you are willing to be treated. And historically, I've struggled with boundaries and saying no when I want to say no and saying yes when I want to say yes because, well, for many reasons. But an example of that is leaving a yoga studio that I was a part of for a couple of years and pretty heavily involved in. And one of my core values is loyalty. I am a very loyal person, and I also love people, and I love relationships and community. And for those yogis out there, you know what I mean when you join a yoga studio and you go regularly and you see the same faces and you're part of the same groups and the same classes and all of those things, you become attached to that group. But for about 6 months, I felt myself feeling like I was no longer growing in the environment of this yoga studio. And so for 6 to 8 months, I thought it's going to get better. I'm loyal. These are people that I genuinely care about and still care about. And I'll just wait for it to get better. And then it got to a point where I just had a realization. And I thought, I'm staying here for them. I'm not staying here for myself. And I'm paying to be here. So what is the point? And I think that it's so important, even when it's a really tough decision and you don't want to disappoint people and you are loyal, that you are protecting yourself and you're protecting your own boundaries and you're creating an environment for yourself in which you can continue to grow. So saying yes when you want to say yes, saying no when you want to say no, having those healthy boundaries. It's noticing any incongruencies with what I say versus what I do and being truthful about it. So an example comes to mind of my husband and I having a quarrel. And he called me out on something. To be honest with you, I don't even remember what it was. But I realized in that moment, he was absolutely right. And I was conscious of this thought. I could get defensive and be like, well, that's not really what I meant. And so you just totally misinterpreted me. Or I could fess up and be honest and say, well, dang, you are absolutely right. And I'm sorry. What I said versus what I did were two totally different things. And thank you for making me aware of it. And I'm going to try and do better next time. It's facing my deepest pain instead of running from it. I have learned this lesson over and over the hard way because I've been so much like Jonah and the whale, like, I'll do anything. Please don't make me face my pain. Swallow me up, whale. And self-discovery has taught me that the fear of facing my pain is way worse than the reality of facing my pain. And the more I face my pain and work through it and walk through it, the more I realize how strong and deep and powerful I really am. So facing my pain instead of running from it really, really is a huge part of what knowing myself feels like. It's overlooking trends when they don't spark joy in me. No more keeping up with the Joneses. I love this one because as a youngster, any new thing that came out or came up, I was like, oh, I have to be a part of that. I have to do that. That's what everybody's doing. And the older I get and the more I understand who I am, the less attracted to trends I become, especially if they don't spark any joy in me. It's a state of flow and ease in my day because I'm acting intuitively and respecting my boundaries. I'm going to talk about flow more, but when I'm in a state of flow, it feels like time stops. I'm so into what I'm doing that everything around me keeps spinning, but I feel like I'm still. And I feel like in order to get into a state of flow, knowing who you are is the biggest part of that. Because you're living aligned. You're living in that heart, spirit, mind, body connection and respecting all of those things. I just don't think on the regular, we respect ourselves enough and respect our intuition and inklings. So that state of ease just, oh, it feels so good to me, and it feels so right and so aligned. It's being okay with not getting the new handbag or device or whatever it is, because I know myself and my eye right now is on getting out of debt. So this one is very specific, but what knowing yourself feels like for me this year, I want to get out of my debt. I don't want any more student loan payments. I don't want any credit card payments. And so making the decision to not buy something new is super easy for me because my eye is on being out of debt and the freedom that will come with that. It's living so honestly and congruently that I don't mind what others think. An example that comes to mind is you meet someone new, they friend you on Facebook or they follow you on Instagram, and maybe I'm the only one that does this, but I highly doubt it. I used to go through my Instagram profile or go through my Facebook profile and try and think of it from their perspective. Like, what are they going to think about what I posted here? What are they going to think about this video that I made? What are they going to think about this photo that I put up? And now as I get older and I become more and more comfortable in my own skin, I go, bless them, and whatever they want to think about me, I bless that too. So I mind less and less and less about what others think. It's having the courage to stand up for myself when a boundary has been crossed. This relates to the yes-no principle of saying no when you want to say no and saying yes when you want to say yes. But I think the actual reality of telling somebody when they've crossed a boundary is really hard because it can be confrontational. But the thing that I keep coming back to is I don't want to feel resentful toward anybody in my life, especially people that I see regularly. So if I feel like I'm being taken advantage of, or there's been some kind of disrespect or just complete inconsideration, I will gently say, you know what? And not publicly because I don't want to shame anybody, but you know what? That made me uncomfortable and I want to tell you why. Or when you speak to me like that, it makes me feel like this. So I try not to be volatile. I don't want to bring out the big guns, but I do want to respect myself enough to stand up for myself when I need to. That feels very much like knowing myself and truly being myself. It's pursuing my dreams now, even when other people my age are getting regular paychecks, which I don't, because I don't have a traditional 9-to-5 job. And the reason I'm okay with pursuing my dreams now, even though other people are my age are getting regular paychecks and 401ks and all of those things, is because I know myself well enough to know that when I turn 90 and look back over my life, I will never, ever, ever, ever regret having followed my gut and acted on it. It's the bravery to risk looking silly because I'm so passionate about something. For me with music, it's so vulnerable when you write a song and you record it and you release it into the world, or you're playing live in front of an audience, because it's part of who you are. It's vulnerable, and some people are going to like it and some people aren't. That's music. That's creativity. I mean, that's life. But I know myself well enough to know that I'm okay with being silly if the end goal is to release my art into the world, because that brings me so much joy. It's understanding and accepting consequences. You know, I think one of the major complaints that the baby boomers have with millennials is that they think we have our head in the clouds. And sometimes millennials do. I feel like we're big dreamers. We have big aspirations, yet we don't want the same things that the baby boomers wanted. And in some ways, I understand why baby boomers have such a beef with millennials, because sometimes this head in the clouds dreamer mentality does breed this idea of I don't need to worry about the consequences. As long as I'm happy, it doesn't matter. I'm looking out for me. I'm not thinking about what others, how others are going to be affected by my actions, because the most important thing is that I'm happy. And I think that that is wrong. I think that it is so important to understand that everything that you do has a consequence. And if we aren't being conscious about that, if we aren't considering others and considering people that we love, then I think that that's wrong. It doesn't mean that we can't go out and do that thing, but I think we need to be very aware of how our actions are going to be affecting others. And understanding and accepting consequences is part of knowing yourself. When you don't, I feel like that's pulling a veil over a huge chunk of your life. It's understanding and accepting and apologizing when I've done something wrong. This is an extension of understanding and accepting consequences. It's being brave enough to say, I was such an idiot right there, or man, I acted like an asshole. And I need to own up to that, and I need to apologize and make that right, because I want to have good and positive relationships in my life. I don't want to avoid people. I don't want things to be weird. So I want to address the weirdness. I want to talk about it. I want to apologize for it if I did something wrong. And then I want to move on. That is knowing yourself to me. That's being brave. It's being different and being okay with that. This one, especially for the youngsters that are listening, this can be hard, but my darlings, be who you are, own what you love, do what you enjoy, especially if it's not hurting anyone else. And if the people around you don't understand, you will find people that do. It may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, it may not be next year, but don't give up on who you are and what it is that you love. You will find the right group of people to support you, or the right niche for your art, etc. So being different and being okay with it. It's knowing your feelings and the truth behind them and living authentically with that. This goes back to core values for me. What is it that I value in this world? One of the things in the United States that is so prevalent and that is so heavy on so many people's minds is financial success. I would be lying to you if I said I don't want to have financial success, or I don't want to be able to purchase X, Y, and Z. But because of my own dance with self-discovery, I know that what's even more important to me than financial success is emotional freedom. It's this idea that I could have all the money in the world, but if I'm not living in alignment, if I'm hustling away and breaking my back over something that I don't care about, I'm never going to feel happy. I'm never going to feel joy. So knowing my feelings and the truth behind them and living authentically with whatever that truth is, that's knowing myself. That's knowing what it feels like to feel like myself. It's going to sleep at night knowing I didn't break the promises I made to myself. Women especially, I think, struggle with this, and I am one of those women. I want everybody in my life to feel like they are the most important person in the world to me. And the consequence of that is I often put other people's feelings and desires above my own. But the older I get, the more I realize that when I am true to my own desires, when I am respectful of my own heart's inklings, then I can show up for those people so much more joyfully, so much more wholeheartedly. And so refusing to break my own promises has been a huge, huge part of figuring out what it really feels like to be myself. It's being present with myself. I have certainly been somebody in the past who has been guilty of filling up my time and filling up my schedule because I didn't want empty space, because when I was alone by myself, I didn't know what to do with it. And I think that that's normal. I think that's a normal human reaction. You can't go through life without experiencing trauma and emotional trauma. It's part of the human experience. Pain, triggers, all of those things. But being present with yourself and allowing yourself to be alone with yourself is a huge part of figuring out how to really be yourself. If you're never by yourself, how are you going to be able to go out into the world and be that truest, most authentic version of you? I'm coming up on the last one, and I'm sure I could think of a million more, but I love this one so much. It's living in a way that is less reactionary and more on purpose. It's living with intention. And at the beginning of this episode, I talked about the importance of creating a space where it would be a catalyst for you figuring out who you are, for me figuring out who I am. And I do that through time alone and just space from the world. I do it through meditation, and I do it through journaling. And this one that I just read of being less reactionary and more on purpose and living intentionally, it's so much easier to do that when you are journaling and you are writing down and admitting what your intentions are. And when you do this daily and say, my intention for the day is blank, whether it's to accomplish X, Y, and Z, or just move through the day peacefully, or find more moments of joy. When you are actively writing down what your intention is, it's infinitely easier to live that out rather than just having that thought and allowing it to be a fleeting thing. So I'm going to wrap up. This was a lot longer than I meant for it to be. Oh, I do want to keep these episodes on the shorter side, but all of this to me is what it feels like to really be yourself in action. It's acceptance, it's presence, it's healthy boundaries, it's admitting when you're wrong, it's being excited about whatever it is you're excited about and not trying to hide that. It's complicated and complex, yet it's so, so, so simple. It's one of those dichotomous things that we experience in life that is part of the fabric of being a human. So may we know ourselves so we can truly go out into the world and be ourselves. I wish you light, and I wish you love, and I wish you peace. And if you want more information about this podcast, please visit jaclynsteeleinternational.com/selfdiscoverypod. And if you want to connect with me further and personally, please visit me on Instagram at Jaclyn Steele. I'm so excited to be doing this podcast, and I'm so excited that you are listening. Thank you.